Hey everybody, I'm Paul Gottsegen, Chief Marketing Officer for ISG. I have the pleasure of being here with my colleague, Prashant Kelker, who's the President of Americas Consulting and a longtime thought leader in our sector. So it's wonderful to be with you yet again for predictions for the coming year. Now we're moving on into 2025. So welcome, Prashant.
Lovely to be here, thanks.
Okay, well, let's kick it off with just a broad question about what are the top 2 or 3 mega trends that you're predicting for 2025?
I think the top 2-3 trends is going to be affected a lot by the macroeconomics we see. I think the one we're going to probably talk for the rest of this conversation is AI, so I won't go deep into that. I'll probably go a little deeper into the other 2. The first is continuous transformation. There's very little money for net new things nowadays. So we are seeing a lot of what we're calling sunrise sunset deals. So don't sunrise something new unless you can sunset the old. And can you do it in slices in a way that each slice pays for the previous slice? So we can use the words we want. We could call this continuous transformation. We can call it sunrise sunset. I think the next 2 years, as long as we have interest rates at the rates we have, we're going to see many transformations run this way. This is going to probably impact anybody who's aiming only at net new. So if you're aiming as a business only at the net new and ignoring the legacy and the old.
So particularly digital transformation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
So now's the time to probably combine these 2 as an offering and take that to the market.
And what's another key trend aside from the continuous transformation in AI?
As this happens, I think something else is going to happen, and that is we're going to get more and more industry specific. So aside from the SAPs and the Oracles of the world, it's not going to be all about Snowflake and Databricks. We're going to see more and more industry specific solutions in healthcare, in financial services, even deep inside utilities. You're going to see a discussion around should it be Maximo or not. I'm taking Maximo as just an example. We're going to see more and more best of breed solutions come up. So a move towards more and more software in the market.
And verticalized software, less horizontal.
We'll see both.
Yeah.
We'll see both.
And how do you see like the interplay between hyperscalers? You mentioned like Snowflake and Databricks, like the data owners, and then the main SaaS players like a Salesforce or some of the other big applications. Those are 3 different factions, and how do they all play within the world of 2025 as we're driving transformations with clients?
I don't know whether they'll play. I think they're going to fight. So there's going to be a battle of data. Now the data sits in what the world calls systems of record. It sits in SAP and Oracle for supply chain. It sits in Salesforce for sales and CRM. So with these systems are becoming walled gardens. So you can do a lot inside the system, but you can't take the data out of the system and marry it with data from another system and derive insights from that marriage.
Okay.
So one thing is to have data sitting in the systems. You're going to have also the hyperscalers come in and say, well, H100s are very expensive. So do you really want to do your proof of concept on very expensive hardware or just get it from the cloud? And then there is the Snowflake and Databricks who says, well, you know what? It's not just about having systems here and data in these systems. Can we pull the data out just for insights and then bring it back? So keep the data in the system of record, but run the insights outside. So I think there's going to be a battle amongst these 3.
That'll be fun to watch.
I think the winner is the system integrator.
Right. Yeah. Talk about AI in the context of there's existing operations that could probably save a lot of cost if they deploy AI, and then there's companies that are trying to be on the cutting edge and transform themselves by really investing in AI. Talk about those 2 different lanes and how to think about them as we move into next year.
I think companies are trying to do both lanes. So, of course, what captures the headlines is the second lane. the one where they're trying to use AI to do net new things. Just call that shape the new. And let's just park that for a minute.
Okay.
And let's talk about the other lane that I think you just spoke about. And I call that optimize the existing. So 2 lanes, optimize the existing and shape the new. There is a lot you can do in your current operations, your contact center, the way you run F&A, the way you actually do claims management right now with AI in. We are seeing anywhere between 12 to 60%, depending on whom you ask and what business case you look at, on optimizing the existing.
Just straight sourcing, but deploying AI within how you're doing the sourcing transaction, everything that revolves around that?
Exactly, right? So you take labor out of the market. Now, I don't know what this does to system integrators who have hundreds and thousands of people in India. That's a different question. But on an existing operation, AI can take so much of labor out of that operation that the percentages we are seeing are phenomenal. Now, those are cost savings, and these are on OPEX budgets. So this is not even cost avoidance, this is real savings. Now, you could use this exact same savings on the Shape the New. And I think on the Shape the New, this is where I think we're going to see new players. Is it going to be, going back to our previous discussion, is it going to be just the hyperscalers and the Snowflake Databricks and the systems we speak about? I don't think so. I think we're going to see it breaking up north and south, and it's going to break north and south and also east and west. So we're expecting multiple categories to show up.
Along those lines, talk about this concept of data engineering as a prerequisite for shaping the new. What's involved? What should organizations think about in 2025 in terms of data with the advent of AI?
That's an important question, because I think that's going to affect the spends in the next 2 years. Most AI POCs work. We're not seeing some that don't work, because you're doing this under lab conditions. All conditions are ideal. POCs usually work. You're trying to ask one question based on a certain set of data. Let's say you start seeing the ROI. Now, you discovered that you got the, let's take an example. Let's say it's a dynamic pricing model. Okay. And you found a model that works. Do you need that dynamic pricing model to run every month? For every product? For every geography? Do you have the data to support all these 3? How often should you pull the data to support all these 3? Should you work with only the last 18 months of data? What about if this model runs for 2 years? Do you use the data that you dynamically priced 6 months ago for all the data now?
I'm supposed to be asking the questions.
Right? So, right, you see the complications and what happens if you go from proof of concept to scale.
Right.
And in all of that, we are seeing that the spending is very counterintuitive. On $10 of AI, $8 is going towards data for this reason. So you're going to see a lot of care and feeding, data engineering. It's going to lead to new concepts like model gardens, where models are sitting together in this garden, common care and feeding. You're going to also see model switchboards, which means each of these models exposing their insights either outside the enterprise or it's within the enterprise, so you can combine them in any which way. And all of this is even before you start going towards agentic AI.
Let's talk about agentic AI. Gen AI, generative AI was all the rage, still is, but it got all the headlines, and then this agent model came about, and now it's getting all the headlines. What's your prediction about the balance between Gen AI, agentic AI, maybe throw in machine learning? How should we think about AI in 2025?
I think we are best served if we take a portfolio approach to AI. So even before all of this came through, we were doing AI, especially in financial services, right? So throughout New York, we were doing AI, even before it became cool. Now the word for that is grand old-fashioned AI, GoFi, right? So there's GoFi, there's predictable AI, and now just club Gen AI and agentic AI together. And you're looking at a portfolio approach to your AI use cases. But all of those are using the same data.
Right.
You have data engineering feeding this entire portfolio. Now, the agentic part of it is only the parts where you need where you want to allow autonomous action. Now, autonomous action is going to challenge one new concept, and that's human in the loop. Human in the loop starts getting into a gray area. Where is it human sometimes in the loop? Where is human in the loop, and where is human out of the loop? Is the way you'll have to look at your portfolio approach. If you ask me where is agentic AI going to show up, I'm expecting 3 areas. One, I spoke about dynamic pricing. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. There's no person being injured because of that dynamic pricing. The other one I'm expecting is in logistics. So expect travel, transport, hospitality, retail, CPG to show up with these 3.
Now, why logistics? What?
Because if you look at operations management, and I don't know whether I should raise it. You have companies like FedEx, UPS, etc., where the logistics of in which way should the van move, given the packages in it, in a way that it's optimally distributed with the minimum carbon footprint and the fastest distribution is an operations exercise. I mean, it's operations management for the last 30 years. Now, this routing can be dynamic because there's no real-time traffic information fed into this, right? So, a lot of agentic AI can now be in the autonomous routing. It's fed directly to the.
That makes sense. And tell me about what you're thinking of the tension between IT and the business, and the work we do for CIOs and their staff, and the work that people do for finance and accounting or other sorts of business process. How does that evolve given the technology and other dynamic changes happening next year?
This is probably going to be the most important question for anybody in these fields for the next 2 years. And I know that we are also thinking a lot about exactly these. Fields that were separate are going to be merged.
Business process and IT?
Business process and IT, infrastructure and applications, because everything is public cloud anyway. Do you really need infrastructure deals?
Right.
Anybody's guess. And we have 4 places where we don't even need these infrastructure deals any longer. At the same time, things we thought were together, I think are going to get dismantled. We always thought applications is applications, and we never spoke data. Will data be a separate category on its own? Will it sit with applications? Or to my earlier point of the battle of data, will it sit separately? Will we have data engineering specialists vis-a-vis application specialists? Today's AI proof of concept is tomorrow's application. So where will AI finally show up?
And companies are starting to hire data engineering leaders.
They're starting to hire data engineering leaders, but there's a paucity in that talent in the market. So I think there'll be a limit to it. The right way to do is use external help, and I think that's what also our research showed up from the September report.
Prashant, what are the challenges with cybersecurity? A hot topic always, has been for years. Anything new and different in terms of what's trending for next year?
I think 2 things. The first is cybersecurity will be less and less a topic of foundation. There are simply too many entry points, and what we thought was in terms of perimeter is becoming perimeterless. So cybersecurity will become even more holistic, like an umbrella. Now, if you're running the infrastructure of a firm, you actually might have an angle on this because infrastructure itself, as it goes towards public cloud, doesn't disappear. It starts moving towards what the industry is calling self-healing and observability.
Okay.
The more infrastructure moves towards self-healing and observability, cybersecurity parts are taking care of themselves. So leave that aside. as this happens, the entire attention is going to move towards data being exchanged, and data gets exchanged over networks. So network becomes even more important than storage. And the more you go towards zero trust on network, the less you will need routers.
Okay.
So it's very curious to see how cybersecurity, infrastructure, self-healing, observability, network equipment all come together. Never a dull moment.
Talk about global capability centers, formerly known as captives. I know that's become top of mind and a big market force. What do you see the changes happening in that arena the next year?
So this is probably where you'll get a little bit of a biased answer, Paul, because I spent the first 10 years of my life in one. I was in the captive center or the GCC of Nokia.
Mm-hmm.
It's where I grew up. And having gone through that and then being inside Nokia using the GCC, the problems from then are the problems we also see now. And it's never about technology. It's about having your own DNA do things. So what's the right mix between having a partner to help you, but sometimes having your own DNA do things? What's that right mix? That's been a puzzle for the last 25 years.
Maybe related to that, outsourcing versus insourcing. Outsourcing has been a thing for a long time. And somewhat related to GCCs is this concept of figuring out what to insource. What's your point of view on that area?
The point of view is, let's start, before we talk about outsourcing and insourcing, we should talk about what is your talent strategy. So what's your talent strategy and what is your way to access that talent? If you have the answers to these two questions, then everything else becomes a means to the end.
You mentioned data engineering. What are some of the other areas that are going to be very difficult to find talent for, that organizations will both need to groom their own talent, but also lean heavily on providers for going forward?
We're focusing a lot on the softer parts of technology. We're focusing on AI, we're focusing on data. I think the Bay Area always says, just to see if something runs, use software. When it runs, software is not the answer. The answer is hardware. Because hardware will do a job more efficient than software. We forget about the hardware side of things. So as we talk AI, what's the AI of things? Just like we spoke about internet and went from internet things. What is AIoT?
So there's a lot of infrastructure, including the hardware, to spur on AI.
And there's not enough attention being on that topic. We start seeing this now in certain aspects. We start seeing it in financial services, who've always been ahead of the rest of the market. While the entire world is moving towards 90% public cloud, we're seeing financial services move towards edge data centers, purpose-built infrastructure. Is it quantum? Maybe it's not quantum, and I'm not going to have an opinion on Willow's latest on Willow. It's too early to see, but at least as a trend, you can start seeing purpose-built infrastructure. Give it a name, cognitive infrastructure, as something to look at.
Let me ask you this. You have so much visibility across our whole client base and see all these different industry sectors. What advice would what industry sector should the other industry sectors look to? What's happening that's interesting within any one industry that could be transferable to many others?
There's something to be learned from everyone. Learn from financial services on how to use partners for technology. They taught us outsourcing, they taught us offshoring. Now they're teaching us how to use open source on AI. Learn from the B2C, that's consumer goods, retail, travel, transport, hospitality, on what technology to use for customer experience, what technology to use for front end. Learn from asset heavy companies like manufacturing, oil, gas, utilities on what happens when you go towards operational technology, when it starts going towards asset heavy industries and how to make a business case. There's something to be learned from all. And then finally there's high tech. Learn from high tech on how to play partnerships.
What do you see in manufacturing? I know that's a huge, very interesting, complex area, heavily interested in AI and trying to make supply chains more efficient. You've had a lot of experience there. What do you see in manufacturing?
Here's my hope. My hope is over the next 3 years, as a world, I think the US will always have the answer for the soft things, for AI, for data. Europe will always have the answer for things.
The answer for things?
Anything.
Anything.
Anything you touch. To do that with that quality, for that price point, Europe.
Okay.
To feed that and bring it to life with data, US. I think if both these parts of the world went towards what they can do best and then bring it together, I think we will have AIoT.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Prashant. It's such a pleasure to do this with you every year. My sense is you're pretty much always right. Certainly have a higher batting average than almost anybody else. So thanks for your time and your predictions. Thank you for listening.